when it comes to safety, privacy and dignity of both sexes. Maya Forstater, the executive director of the campaign group, said the research provides evidence of the strength of feeling and the voices of thousands of ordinary people who are being ignored. Well, we're joined now by the campaign group's director of advocacy and the author of Trans When Ideology Meets Reality, Helen Joyce. Helen, tell us a little bit about the findings of your report.
Hi, thanks for having me on. So we already knew from polls that were weighted to the population that most people agree that single sex should mean single sex and not single gender or single gender identity. And that people think that in private spaces, toilets, changing rooms, dormitories, sleeper trains, and also in specialist places like rape crisis centres and prisons, women and men need to be able to be separate when they're vulnerable, when they're undressed, when they're sleeping, in particular for women. But what hasn't happened is to go beyond that and to say to people who value single-sex spaces, why? So that's what we did. We asked people in February to get onto us and answer a bunch of questions about single-sex spaces and say, what do you value about them? Because this is a human rights issue. It's not a popularity issue. If 60% of people are okay with single-sex spaces and 40% aren't, we still have to have single-sex spaces for the 40%. And it's often talked about as if it's something that the majority can overrule the minority. Well, already we know that it's the majority want them. We wanted to know why. And what women told us was really heartrending, how they couldn't be included in public life if they weren't able to get access to single-sex spaces, not just for the obvious things like getting changed in a swimming pool, but Muslim women need them to adjust their hijab. People who are rape victims, previous rape victims, may feel traumatized if they have to share with men in enclosed spaces. And so lots and lots and lots of women said that the trend for gender neutral or mixed sex spaces meant they had to stay home. Over and over again, we heard the sentence, I never went back.
Paul?
Helen, people on the other side of the argument would often use the argument, look, aren't you just dismissing every man as a potential predator? And if there are men out there who are determined to engage in abusive behaviour, then they would just go into a women-only toilet anyway and do it. If they have that intent, they're not going to be put off by a sign on the door. How would you respond to those arguments?
Well, it's the famous not all men argument, isn't it? I'm not saying all men, I'm saying some men. Almost all people who commit violent crimes, and in particular sexual crimes, are men, and overwhelmingly women are the victims. Men are also stronger than women, so can usually overpower a woman if they want. And it's about norms. If you've got clearly signed single-sex spaces and everyone understands that only female people go into this room, and an obviously male person going in is automatically a suspicious person. So people said things like, when I was a teenager, a drunk man followed me into the toilets at a bar, but the bouncer came straight in afterwards and told him to leave. In mixed-sex spaces, no one would do that. We really heard some stories that I would very much like the sort of people who say, oh, this is scaremongering, this is just old-fashioned dinosaurs talking about, purity politics. I'd very much like them to read some of these stories and then look me in the eye and say it again.